Hi, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. I want to try and get to 1 million subscribers. Thank you. This case takes place in the USA in the year 2008. When a romantic couple kills, the individuals often fall into one of two categories: the manipulator and the manipulated. This isn't always true, but in today's case, it is. Typically, it's the older, more dominant partner who ignites the darkness in the other. Quite often, this is a psychopathic or sociopathic male. But in this case, the person pulling the strings may surprise you. A big thank you to today's sponsor, CyberGhost VPN. Online privacy is probably more important than ever, and one of the easiest and cheapest ways to prevent from hackers is to use a VPN. With over 38 million users, great reviews from a number of tech review companies, and also being incredibly cheap, CyberGhost is my personal go-to. With CyberGhost VPN, all of your traffic goes through a secure VPN tunnel, your IP address is hidden, and your data encrypted. CyberGhost VPN is available on all platforms: Windows, macOS, Android, iOS, and many others. The main reason I use a VPN is because it encrypts all of your internet traffic and routes it through secure servers, so you're practically invisible online. A nice bonus is that CyberGhost VPN has servers in over 100 countries, which means you can access content from anywhere. If you want to see what other countries have on Netflix, well, you can with CyberGhost VPN. You can unlock content from over 40 streaming platforms, and access geo-restricted content from websites such as YouTube. And you can protect up to 7 devices with just one account, so there's plenty to cover your phone, laptop, and any other devices you have, plus you can give it to friends and family if you want to. Right now, you can get CyberGhost VPN for just over $2 a month, plus 4 months free. That's 83% off using the code below. They also have a 45-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk, and it's a small price to pay for peace of mind on the internet. So if you're ready to take control of your internet privacy, hit the link in the description or pinned in the comments to get started with CyberGhost VPN today. Meet Morgan Leppert. Morgan was born on the 12th of January 1993 in West Palm Beach, South Florida. Morgan was born to her mother, Jerry Leppert. There is little information in the public domain with regard to her father. However, it is known that she was raised at least partly by her stepfather. They lived on a 5-acre piece of farmland, which was a great setting to raise children. Her mother remembered Morgan as a happy little girl who loved animals, horses, and swimming. She called Morgan her sunshine, describing her as sweet, delightful, and happiest when outdoors with animals and her many cousins. Morgan was the youngest among them. At some point during Morgan's childhood, her mother and stepfather moved to Putnam County, and it's here where she attended school. The principal of this school described Morgan as steady, quiet, and unassuming. She was described as generally good, but an unremarkable student. She had a core group of friends, interacted socially, and fitted the profile of an average middle school student. However, things reportedly changed when Morgan entered high school. Her principal later revealed that Morgan had serious attendance issues, and even when she was in school, she would attend classes fairly erratically. She was becoming rebellious. This led to her mother to switch her to homeschooling at the age of 14 in 2007. She thought that school was clearly not a fit for this farm girl. It was around this time in October of 2007 that she started to get closer to a friend of hers named Toby Lowry. Toby was a friend of her cousin's. He was born in Gainesville, and he had never left the state of Florida. At the time, Toby was 22, but everyone in Morgan's circle of friends and family thought that he was 16, maybe 17. So there were some slight concerns when the two were left alone together, but besides this, people generally accepted their growing and romantic relationship. Toby would visit Morgan at her house, but he never stayed over. But that changed when he showed up one day claiming that his stepfather had kicked him out and that his mother was dying of cancer. He told Morgan that he had nowhere else to go and that he was now homeless. Morgan asked her mother Jerry if he could stay over just for a while until his parents took him back. Jerry agreed, but only under one condition: that the two sleep in separate rooms. This arrangement was only supposed to be for a short while, but as more time went on, he remained in the household. He spent Thanksgiving and Christmas with the Lepperts, becoming an almost adopted member of the family. Around this time, Morgan and Toby's relationship quickly intensified. The couple became openly passionate. Toby posted on his MySpace, saying that he was taken by Morgan Lowry. As endearing as that may have seemed to Morgan, it is assumed that the family never saw this MySpace account. Otherwise, they may have had some serious concerns. Accompanying that message on MySpace was a description of himself. Toby said that he was the baddest MF in the state. Moreover, his page was filled with images of drugs, violence, Confederate flags, skulls, and foul language. Her family thought that he was a lovely boy, but that facade was about to come crashing down. While cleaning up the room, Jerry spotted a piece of paper with Toby's name on it. At the top, it read, "Probation." Her shock only grew as she read further. She saw that Toby had passed convictions for drug charges, theft and burglary. He had been serving a 20-month prison sentence, but was released on probation earlier in the summer of 2007. But the real blow came when she saw his date of birth. It read, the 17th of December, 1985. This was no boy. He wasn't 17 or 16. He was a 22-year-old man. Jerry reacted as any mother would. Toby was thrown out of the house, with Jerry threatening to call the police, as he was much older than Morgan was. Morgan was still a minor. She was only 14. Jerry told the two of them that the relationship had to end. However, Morgan kept sneaking off to see Toby. When her mother found out, she disciplined her, but this was not enough to deter Morgan. Her once sunshine child said that she was going to run away to be with her boyfriend. Toby was staying in a trailer park not too far away, and on the 22nd of April 2008, 15-year-old Morgan went to meet Toby and she never came home. When Jerry tried to call her, there was no answer. Jerry found out where Toby was living and she went to the trailer park to confront both Morgan and Toby. When some of the other residents pointed out where Toby had been staying, Jerry walked in and frantically searched for her little girl. But Morgan wasn't there. Jerry was incredibly worried. But this worry then turned to dread when she saw Morgan's mobile phone on the bedside table. The mobile phone had been smashed up, and there was a hammer next to the device. She believed that Morgan had been kidnapped. And so, she reported Morgan missing straight away. The police moved very quickly and went to Toby's parents' house. They knocked on the door and Toby's mother answered. Toby's mother explained that she had had enough of Toby and had given up on him after his recent convictions. Toby and Morgan had come round, but Toby's mother had turned them away. The family was concerned that Morgan was being held against her will and may have been subjected to SA. And so, Morgan's family pleaded with the police to issue a nationwide Amber Alert. Although the police knew that Toby had never left Florida and he had no transportation, so they believed that this was unnecessary. Meanwhile, Toby and Morgan had made their way to Melrose, Florida, around 30 miles northwest. The two were living rough, spending a couple of weeks out in the wild and sleeping on a mattress in the woods. Despite Toby being an adult and Morgan still a child, she had naively chosen to stay by his side. But sleeping on a mattress was not the life Morgan wanted. Morgan wanted to get out of state. She wanted to run away with Toby into the sunset. But to leave the state, the couple needed a car. Toby and Morgan scouted out some nearby vehicles down a street in Melrose called Cherry Laurel Drive. That was when they noticed a 2003 silver Toyota pickup truck with a blue disabled badge in the window. This would make for an easy theft, depending on how disabled the owner was. And so the couple both hatched a plan to take the truck and take the owner's savings. The owner of this truck was a man named James Thomas Stewart. James Stewart was born on the 25th of March 1942. He was living by himself in a bungalow at 109 Cherry Laurel Drive in the small town of Melrose. During his working years, he worked as a commercial fisherman, and a good one at that. But throughout his life he had struggled with a disability. James was born with no hands. His left was a flat stump, but his right had a significant appendage allowing him to form a grip. With that said, his disability never held him back. He was a loving family member, an avid gardener, and he loved his cats. By April of 2008, he was 66 years old, and despite being very self-sufficient, he was still a vulnerable man. Morgan and Toby's plan was twisted, deceptive, heinous, immoral, and reckless. The idea was simple. Morgan would knock on the door, claiming that she needed help so they could get inside, grab the keys, and make a clean escape. And so, on the 25th of April 2008, Morgan knocked on James's door, and James answered. Morgan claimed that her car had broken down and she asked if she could use his phone. James was a pleasant man, and of course, he wanted to help this girl in need. James welcomed her into his home to use the landline, and Morgan made a call. But this call wasn't to a mechanic, it was to her own mobile phone, the one she knew was already broken. The one she broke herself before running away with Toby so the couple couldn't be traced. While she was making the call, Toby entered the house covertly through the rear entrance and grabbed a knife from the kitchen. As he made his way through the house, Toby found Morgan and James. Toby instantly held the knife up to James and demanded the keys to his pickup truck, alongside any spare cash that he had lying around. Morgan then quickly ran and grabbed two big heavy metal pipes and stood in support behind Toby. They exchanged words, but this joint show of force was enough to scare James. James may have been disabled, but he wasn't going to go down without a fight. James began to size up the couple, and then leaped up to defend himself. But James couldn't overcome Toby, and Toby fought back. At first, Toby held off from stabbing James, and he used his fists instead, but this proved to be extremely brutal. When he punched James in the face, it shattered his glasses, leaving cuts to his eyes. James was semi-blind, and now he was knocked to the ground. Toby continued his assault by stomping on his throat several times. As James lay in agony on the ground, Toby decided to take things further. He stood over James and pulled out his knife. He took the blade and decided to stab James in the chest to ensure he stayed immobile. James was slowly bleeding out and was still conscious. According to Toby, Morgan turned to him and said, "We're going to have to kill his ass." She allegedly explained how if they didn't, they would never make it out of the state and be able to run away together. According to Toby, he was reserved about this idea at first, but ultimately he was persuaded by Morgan, a 15-year-old girl. He turned and asked her, "Is this what you really want?" Morgan replied by saying, "Yes, let's kill him, take the truck, and get out of here." James was still conscious, and he overheard the entire conversation. With his voice trembling and in extreme pain, he said, "Why are you going to kill me?" Toby ignored this question, walked over to him, and stabbed him several times, cutting a deep wound down to the bone. Toby then unleashed a savage assault, stomping on James's head, slamming it against the wall, and crushing his skull in a truly horrific manner. Blood was filling the floor, and with every kick, brain matter was exiting through James's nose. Toby was convinced he was dead, but this was not conclusive. Morgan felt that they had to leave with no doubt in their minds whether he was dead or alive. So when Toby left the room, he heard Morgan repeatedly thumping two heavy metal poles, smashing into James's face. She even picked up a knife and stabbed him. And finally, Morgan grabbed a plastic bag out of the kitchen and wrapped it around James's head. She did this to make sure that he was truly dead. Morgan then found the keys to the car and stole James's wallet. They made no effort to clear up the crime scene, They left the weapons, and then they simply ripped the disabled badge off the car and took off, heading towards the US-Mexican border. Meanwhile back home, Jerry contacted every news outlet she could, desperate to get Morgan's picture on the news, hoping that this would bring her home. The police were making inquiries, but they thought they had a breakthrough when they managed to access Morgan's phone call history. They saw that a Melrose man named James Stewart had tried calling her broken mobile. A police officer was dispatched to the house to see if they could talk to James in connection with Morgan's disappearance. The policeman tried getting James's attention by knocking on his door. However, there was no answer. For some reason, the police officer decided he would come back later and check again. Meanwhile, Morgan and Toby were making their way across the states, heading for Texas. Whilst driving through Valdosta, Toby and Morgan decided to pick up a hitchhiker named Robert Booker, a 43-year-old man. This is an important piece of the puzzle, as you will later understand. On the 1st of May 2008, nearly a week after James's murder, a concerned family member of James's decided to contact the police. They had not heard from James in some time, and this was very unusual. When the police went to check up on James, they were faced with one of the most horrific scenes any officer can ever face. It was blatantly obvious that James had been killed in the most gruesome of ways. His body had been there for a while, and he had already started to decompose. The officers then realised that the last phone call made to Morgan's phone was from James's phone, so they began to wonder that one of the two lovers knew what happened to James. As Morgan was a minor, she was initially thought to be a victim in this crime. So with this, a warrant was issued for the arrest of Toby for grand theft auto, interfering with the custody of a child, and in connection to the murder of James. The police issued an amber warning to alert all of the police forces across state lines, and this alert was successful. On the 3rd of May 2008, at approximately 4 p.m, a motorist in Texas recognized Morgan Leppert and Toby Lowry. This motorist had seen the couple on the national news reports, and he called 911. This then led to their apprehension by the local authorities. Once the identity of the couple was verified, they were taken into custody for questioning, and this is where things become a little weird. The El Paso police force allowed the Putnam County officers to fly out to El Paso to interview the couple. The interviews are hard to watch. Initially, Morgan was being interviewed as a victim, which Jerry Leppert was told. However, Morgan was surprisingly forthcoming, almost bragging and giggling about how she and Toby had managed to escape Florida just as they planned. It became clear that Morgan wasn't a regular 15-year-old. They were accomplices in this escape and the crime. Morgan was being playful and laughing, a sinister action knowing what she had done to James Stewart. Morgan claimed ignorance about the truck, insisting that Toby had found it. She said she didn't know how he got it, where it came from, or who it belonged to. She was just pleased to be leaving Florida. The police knew that Morgan went with Toby at her own free will, but that she was naive and ill-informed. But they ultimately thought that she was innocent of what happened in Melrose. That was until the police interviewed Toby. Toby painted a very different picture of what happened, against the will of his attorney, and before they could even arrive. Toby swore to his mum that he would not confess, but he did confess, and it was incredibly graphic. He stood up in the interview and role-played stomping on James's head, making noises and detailing how he stabbed him. He started his confession by claiming that the plan was entirely Morgan's idea. She was set on running away, and he simply made it happen. And when their plan to steal a car turned violent, she told him they needed to kill him. He then detailed the moments when Morgan assaulted him with the pipes and suffocated him to death. From Toby's position, he claimed he was doing whatever it took to make Morgan happy. He said that she was in charge and was calling the shots. That's when the police returned to Morgan. They shifted the line of questioning. They no longer believed her to be an innocent victim. The police didn't notify her mother straight away, and the defense lawyer decided not to turn up. The decision to interview Morgan without a lawyer stirred significant controversy in the months that followed. When the police interviewer told Morgan about Toby's confession, her story changed. When asked about how many times she stabbed James with a knife, she claimed that she only poked him and never went the whole way through. She then admitted to hitting James over the head with the poles 2 or 3 times. The officer then asked Morgan if she was free to leave at any time. Morgan replied, "I could have left if I wanted to." When asked why she didn't leave, she said that she didn't want to leave Toby behind. The investigator then asked, "You would commit murder because you didn't want to leave Toby?" And she very chillingly replied, "I guess so. I wanted to get out of Florida." She then claimed that James got what he deserved because she thought he was a pervert. Morgan said that there were teenage adult movies littered around the house and that he was disgusting. Because of this, she was arrested in connection of the murder of James Stewart. Over the course of the next few months, Toby made a plea deal with the Florida State Attorney Office so he could avoid the death penalty. Toby's case never went to trial because of this, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Morgan, on the other hand, she had a new attorney from Orlando, Florida. He was convinced that the interviews and the way the police handled the case would mean that she would avoid conviction. After all, she was a minor. The argument was that she was protected by the state as an underage girl and assumed not to be capable of rational adult thinking. Therefore, she would not be tried for the murder of James Stewart. However, this new attorney was wrong. The Florida state was seeking Morgan to be trialed as an adult in court, with the caveat that she couldn't be sentenced to death. On the 7th of August 2009, Morgan went to trial before a jury in Putnam County, facing charges of first-degree murder. Despite the defense objecting and appealing for the trial to be a juvenile trial, and for the interview statement to be struck from the record, none of these objections were accepted. The jury listened in a chilling exchange between Morgan and the detective. What Morgan said were deeply offensive statements, littered with giggles and cold recounts of the events. It was heard on the tapes while she was fighting back the tears and saying that she was sorry and that she did it because she loved her boyfriend. But the jury wasn't convinced that this was truly remorseful. The jury ultimately saw that she was wise enough to be aware of what she was doing, and that she was in control. Before in the story I mentioned that the couple picked up a hitchhiker named Robert. When the prosecution called Robert to take the stand, he supported the view that Morgan was the one in charge. He testified that whilst he was in the car, Morgan often asserted her dominance, with Toby seemingly under her control. If things didn't go her way, she would lash out, and Toby, he would comply. On the 29th of September 2009, Morgan's family and a few supporters filled the courtroom. Morgan entered dressed in a blue uniform and shackles. Morgan teared up, eventually burying her head in one hand as the judge delivered the sentence. Morgan received life imprisonment without the chance of parole. James's brother, Mike Stewart, said, "Every night when I go to sleep, I pray that this whole thing was one big bizarre nightmare." From this point onwards, Morgan was dubbed the Blue-Eyed Devil, a stark contrast to the sunshine her mother once described her as. Following the sentencing, the defense filed an appeal. In 2010, the US Supreme Court's decision in Graham v. Florida prohibited life without parole sentences for juveniles in homicide cases. Because of this, Morgan's sentence was reduced to a 50-year term. And then there were further legal developments. Because of these developments in 2016, Morgan was resentenced. She was resentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole and an eligibility review after 25 years. By the time this comes around, Morgan will be 40 years old. Don't forget to click on the description link to get the special discount CyberGhost VPN is granting our channel users. This application will protect your data while you browse the internet and give you access to all blocked content on the internet for just $2.03 a month. totally risk-free, so check it out, link in the description.